Okay, let's see if this is working.
Testing.
I'm going to ask if we asking Amisha to check how we sound. Hey Lisa, can you hear us? Brian, test.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Test, test, test. Too low. Better?
How about now?
Can you hear us now? If not, how do we turn it up? Barely. Hon, any idea how to turn the volume up on the mics? And we're holding it to our faces. I have no idea how to make it any louder. So holding it like this, you can hear us now when we're like this? Okay, Lisa says no.
That's not good.
There's got to be some sort of volume control or something. Weird. Huh. I sometimes really hate technology, particularly when it's working like this.
Yeah.
Okay, so holding it like this works. Remember the delay. There's a delay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Okay, hey Lisa, make sure you email me. The email it should be in the description, and I've put it in something, and or kevinm.paranormalencyclopedia@gmail.com. I got something to talk to you about other than me coming on your channel. Actually, a project I want to invite you to join me and some other people on. I think it'll be right up your alley. Okay, you need to talk, Brian. Talk.
Okay.
How's he sound?
Can you hear me? I'll just keep talking.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Hey, cool. I just heard us. Okay, just tell everybody to hold on a second. I'm gonna. Say that we're gonna be.
Oh.
Give us a minute.
We're experiencing technical
No,
difficulties
we're not.
right
I'm
now.
just
We're
sharing it to Facebook so people can find us. No technical difficulties. We're on board.
No, we're good. Sarah Silverman is the whore of Zionism. Nice.
Oh, good lord.
I'm sure she's gonna love that. She'll have a field day with it.
I would have a field day with it. It's like. I think my first complaint, if I was her, would be, really, I'm not the whore of at least the whore of Babylon, just Zionism. I'm disappointed.
Yeah. You gotta work for that.
Yeah, you want the full. If you're gonna get the insult, you want the full biblical insult.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, everything's posted. Yeah, I just put the microphone down so I could share things on Facebook. We're ready to get going. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. It's good to be back, particularly since we've been on hiatus for a while we dealt with technical problems.
Yes, and I'm back.
Yes, and Brian is back with me. You might want to move a little closer just so we can get you in shot. Um, but anyway, tonight we're going to be talking about particularly the idea of
Redemption in heaven and hell.
Yes, Misha's saying move the camera close. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
This works.
that's what I did.
We're going to be talking redemption, heaven, and hell. Meanwhile, I want to talk about very briefly about a project that our good friend Virgo Triad has in the works that I'm actually being assisted on. I'm doing some help on. Lisa, this is actually particularly what I wanted to talk to you about. So, Virgo, myself, Brian, and just about everyone else I know, I think, agree that bigotry, hatred, and intolerance are a really big issue in our country right now. I mean, the El Paso shootings had nothing to do with video games. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's more than a little evidence that racism had a big role in it.
Yeah.
Um,
The old convenient scapegoat.
so we're working. Virgo came up with the idea of doing a video of a group of YouTubers and other celebrity types getting together to speak out against hatred. This is Virgo's baby entirely. I've just been very proud to help try and find people I think are worth joining the project. I've gotten a lot of interest. V. Nigel Taylor, former lead singer for Platform One, has expressed interest. Source of Skeptics has expressed interest. Lisa for Truth, I also wanted to invite you. It's anyone who wants, I don't want to open this up to everyone who listens to this who has something to say about bigotry and intolerance. Not because I don't think your opinion's important, but I think most of my listeners and friends all have something to say on the subject.
Yeah.
And if we let everybody do it, it's going to get too big.
Opens up the floodgates.
Yeah. We're looking to give everybody like 30 seconds of time. So it's going to be it's going to be a message, not just a, stop hate type of move on next person type of thing. But I'm very excited to be part of this. For those of you who don't know, Virgo Triad has a really good channel. Don't check it out now because, of course, we're broadcasting. You should listen to us. But if you don't know her, I highly recommend checking it out. She deals with a lot of political conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
The utter nonsense that is the sovereign citizen movement, which is
Fun
10
stuff.
pounds of crazy in a 1 pound bag.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
Yeah, I also recommend just looking up sovereign citizens in general. They're a laugh riot, really. If you've ever seen a video on YouTube of somebody getting pulled over on a traffic stop, and the cop comes up to the car and says, license, registration, proof of insurance, and they go, I do not consent. I'm traveling, not driving. That's what we're talking about. But that's a good topic, and we've already done shows on it.
Yeah.
So I want to get into tonight's topic. And I particularly want to start with this concept of forgiveness. I've been watching a YouTuber I've mentioned more than once that I happen to like, even though we don't see eye to eye on a number of things, which is Shannon Q, talking about the way that forgiveness gets misused, particularly by Christians, but you even see it's become so pervasive, secular counselors do it too. And this idea that if somebody does something wrong to you, you have to forgive them. That's a necessary part of the healing process. And Lisa, Kent Hovind is a sovereign citizen, for the record. She said, crazy as Kent Hovind. You're absolutely right. And he used sovereign arguments to try to get out of paying his taxes.
Yep.
But, and here's the thing. Psychologically speaking, you don't have to forgive somebody to get over trauma. It can be invaluable if that's part of your treatment plan, which is something you should discuss with a psychiatrist, not with me.
Yeah. Well, it also gets down to a misunderstanding of the idea of forgiveness.
Yes, absolutely right. That's the other thing I wanna
Forgiveness is not condoning the act.
No, absolutely.
Or saying it was okay.
It's
about letting it go.
It's not about letting the person do it again.
Right, exactly.
Good.
It's about letting go of the burden that you're keeping on yourself.
Yeah, that I think is when I talk about how people should try to forgive. What I mean is, letting go of your own anger, letting go of your own hatred for your own self. Hey, Virgo!
Oh, there she is.
Yes, the wonderful Virgo triad is in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, Virgo. God bless and keep up your own good work. She said, just wanted to stop by and say hi. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Keep up the good work, guys. And again, right back at you.
Yep.
That's awesome. Awesome to see. Always awesome to see friends in chat. But that's kind of the big thing I want to get across. At least in my personal opinion of forgiveness. There's the old saying that about letting somebody live rent free in your head.
Yeah.
That's unhealthy. Hating people is inherently unhealthy. Because here's the reality: if you get assaulted, or God forbid you get raped or something like that, and forgive me if anything of this discussion is triggering for people, because I don't mean to be, but it needs to be said the way it needs to be said directly. I'll put it like that. You're also awesome, Virgo. Love you back, and I'll talk to you soon. But being angry at a person who attacked you is understandable. It's human. I don't if you're the victim of an attack and you aren't ready to let go, I personally don't put any blame on you.
No.
The blame belongs on the person who attacked you.
No, and it's something that happens in time. It's not something that nobody would expect you to forgive like right away.
Yeah. You're actually
if you're even capable.
But unfortunately, some people do. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You get Christians that misuse this idea of forgiveness, and like, oh no, you have to forgive them. And it's like, I agree that in your own time you should try to forgive people, in the sense of you should let go of that anger, you should let go of that hate. Because here's the hard reality of it: if somebody mugs you or rapes you, they've got once that act is over, they go on with their life and forget about you.
Yeah.
They don't care. You're holding up all this anger and resentment, and it's a one-way street. And ultimately, it's self-destructive. So in time, with proper... And again, I highly encourage... Anyone who's listening to this, who's been the victim of any form of attack, I encourage you to go seek qualified counseling. And work through your issues with them. I've known some wonderful people who've been the subject of horrific attack. And my advice is not substitute for qualified psychiatric treatment or psychological treatment, or even just a good therapist or social worker, or even some priests are actually pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, if you get the right one.
Yeah. The reality is, as problematic as priests as a form of counseling is, it's been a free or low-cost form of counseling for people for hundreds of years in instances where psychiatry didn't exist.
Yeah.
And therapy, they couldn't, people who can't afford therapy. Again, it's no substitute for it, but certainly a priest can't prescribe medication.
Yeah.
But it's a complicated issue. And I think all true forms of forgiveness are an internal thing more than an external thing. There is, to some extent, for a lesser problem, I'm a big believer in the idea of redemption, and the idea that people deserve a second chance. If your brother was a junkie and took money out of your wallet, and he gets himself into a rehab, and he's honestly trying to fix his shit, then yes, I would encourage you to forgive him for what he did wrong, and give him a second chance. But any type of betrayal of trust like that, almost any type of betrayal of trust, I don't want to say any, just because I don't want to, I am not a Sith, I do not deal in absolute. But things like that, where it isn't actual physical assault, you give them people a second chance. You do it with your but do it with your eyes open, for God's sakes. Which is another horrible mistake, and I've seen people make. And a lot of the times you see victims of domestic abuse in particular make this mistake of just they get attacked and they go back and they keep going back and they keep going back, and it's horrifically unhealthy. Um, but you, but yeah, look at look at what they're doing with their life. As I've said in other episodes, I believe in redemption, but when I say redemption, I don't. Redemption is a journey, not a magic wand, and you're there. You go. It's all
Yeah.
better now.
Like go to confession and suddenly everything is washed away.
Well, that's the thing about confession. I actually like the idea of a confession for a couple of reasons. One, it's an idea, and it's an idea that got carried over into 12-step programs of you have to admit to what you did wrong.
Yeah.
And admitting to somebody else what you did wrong has a powerful factor to it. Getting those secrets out in the public and not hiding them. But the thing is there's another side of confession that people forget, which is, of course, penance. The priest, the traditional, of course, form of penance is the priest will give you 12 Hail Marys and 5 Our Fathers and 3 acts of contrition to say. And for some things that, okay, I told a minor lie that didn't get anybody hurt. Go think about what you've done is a reasonable response.
Yeah.
I killed somebody.
Yeah. Not so much.
And here's the thing. In church doctrine, Catholic church doctrine, if you committed a crime, part of penance is going to the police and admitting what you did. They don't tell murderers that, okay, say enough prayers and you're forgiven. It's like, you have to turn yourself in. Rapists, you have to turn yourself in. Sadly, we all know the ugly, hideous reality of it, but absolutely, child molesters, turn yourselves the fuck in.
Yeah.
That people needed to face earthly judgment. Because there's the other thing in a religious sense, which ties into the heaven and hell that we're getting to, is that forgiveness in the next life is not the same thing as immunity to punishment in this one. Even biblically, the Bible says that we're supposed to be subject to the law.
Right.
And under earthly rulership. But not just under Caesar's, it actually is bigger than that. So it's not, forgiveness from God is not carte blanche from mortal punishment. And again, as I said, I personally think forgiveness is a part of redemption, and redemption is part of doing something about what you did to try to make it right. Yes, Lisa for Truth also brings up an excellent point, which is tell that to Jehovah's Witnesses elders. For those of you who aren't aware of this fact, everybody rightly talks about child molestation within the Roman Catholic Church, which is absolutely unacceptable, and they've been projected for centuries. The Jehovah's Witnesses do the same damn thing.
Yeah.
There's been a multi-million-dollar lawsuit by the Australian Royal Commission against the Watchtower Society to release a list of known child molesters that they hid. And it's even more, in some ways, it's even more insidious. Because not only do they protect child molesters, but they have a big prison outreach.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing in and of itself, but they have a big prison outreach to child molesters. The molesters get out. Jehovah's Witnesses welcome them into their congregations without telling people in the congregation about what the person did.
Yeah.
Having these people around children, having these people going door to door to houses where children may be home alone. It's a horrible idea.
Yeah, it's not good for anybody.
Granted, I'm generally of the opinion that child molesters shouldn't get out of prison ever. There just is no, in my mind, there is no acceptable reason to do that.
No, it's pretty far down on the list of things that you can imagine.
I'm not, And it's the other thing I've seen people suggest, which is actually interesting enough to arguably warrant its own topic, which is, well, what about just killing them, the death penalty?
Hmm.
And I'm in favor of the death penalty in theory. In practice, we put a lot of innocent people to death.
Yeah. Yeah, our system of justice isn't perfect,
Yeah.
but there are certain crimes that
That does.
it just makes more sense.
Oh no, I absolutely agree. There's certain crimes that deserve it, but the evidence needs to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think the incidents where the evidence is overwhelming aren't common enough. I mean, if I would argue for death penalty at this point, having researched the subject. If you caught a guy standing over a dead body, holding a blood dripping knife, laughing like the Joker, okay, yeah, that's a good case for the death penalty. Almost anything else, eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable.
Yeah.
DNA evidence is actually pretty good, but it isn't foolproof.
No.
Fingerprints are not nearly as foolproof as people think. There's the big surprise. Is I've been told since I was a kid. I'm sure you've been told since you were a kid. Our listeners have been told since they were kids that no two fingerprints are the same.
Right.
It's not true. It's rare, but there are incidents where it's happened. There was a guy who was sent to prison for murder, who had multiple highly respected, world-renowned experts on the subject of fingerprints say, this is the guy. And the evidence wasn't doctored, the evidence wasn't faked. His fingerprints were just extremely similar to the guy who actually did it. But they wouldn't even consider the idea he wasn't guilty because the fingerprints matched, despite the fact he had good evidence to say he wasn't even in this country at the time.
Oh, wow.
It's like, but the fingerprints matched. It had to be you.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, that's not a reasonable doubt. That's beyond a reasonable doubt.
And there's been many other instances. There's also the ugly reality. A disproportionate number of people on death row suffer some sort of mental dysfunction.
Yeah.
They're people of lower than average intelligence. They're various forms of mental illness.
Well, the people that get sentenced to death, that's the other problem is it's not blind and it's not always fair.
Yeah, race plays a big role in it too.
Yeah.
It's like, and here's the other kicker of the whole thing. And I was told this years ago, and I researched it, and it is in fact true. It's cheaper to keep a prisoner in prison for the rest of their natural life than it is to execute them. So this whole idea of, well, we'll say, why spend the money? Just leave it, to put them in prison, just execute them? No, the appeals process alone. Because if you're on death row, you have mandatory, even if you go before the court and say, I did it, I'm a serial killer, shoot me full of electricity, and all of the evidence says it's true, you still have mandatory appeals. Which is not a bad thing, because the reason why you still have mandatory bills is because mistakes happen.
Yeah.
And they want to be, it's like if you kill somebody, you want to be really sure you got the right guy.
Yeah. Sad to think that it still doesn't happen.
Confessions are not 100% reliable.
No, unfortunately not. People confess sometimes falsely for all kinds of reasons.
Not just that, but people get tricked. Even well-meaning cops sometimes trick people into confessions. It's in the nature, because the things that get somebody who did it to confess,
we'll get somebody
who
who's
didn't
not
do it
to confess.
eventually.
Yeah.
Because eventually, after hours of being detained and being questioned over and over and over again, you start to wonder, did I do it? And you start to think maybe you forgot, maybe you're blocking it out, maybe it can warp with your worldview. But yeah, but I think this is all a good lead-in to a question I get asked pretty often, because my answer tends to surprise a lot of people, given I'm fairly liberal in my version of Christianity, which is, not just specifically heaven and hell, but what do I think happens after we die?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, and I'll say this, and this may shock some of my listeners, I do believe in hell. My view of hell is probably not what most of you are thinking.
That the lakes of fire and burning pitchforks and all that.
Well, a lot of that's just it. A lot of our modern conception of hell isn't even from the Bible. It's from Dante Alighieri.
Yeah. And the Middle Ages.
Yes. Which is largely influenced by Dante.
Yeah.
But the Bible does talk about burning. It does, but it also calls hell the outer darkness. Which is like fire and light. And the other problem you run into is a lot of the verses that deal with hell are allegorical, or one of the most famous is the story of Lazarus and the beggar, or Lazarus and the rich man, which was told by Jesus, which there's considerable debate whether it actually is a recounting of something that happened, or it's just a parable about, the beggar who goes, the beggar goes to the bosom of Abraham, in this case intended to mean heaven, and the rich man goes to hell, and the rich man is burning, and he has a thirst that can't be quenched, and he begs Abraham, and he begs the beggar for a drop of water. But again, it's also there's larger points that are being made here about the importance of generosity and charity, how you treat people.
Yeah.
But a lot of our idea of hell comes. Actually, funny enough, the original version of hell from the Old Testament very much is a place called Gehenna, which is an actual physical place. It's a pit outside of Jerusalem that, at the time the Bible was written, was a burning garbage fire.
Oh, nice. So hell is a dumpster fire.
Yeah, actually, it basically is. So what do I think? What do I think happens after we die? I tend to think that people. Here's the interesting thing I've observed in my own experiences and talking to other people. When you ever notice that right after a loved one dies, for a few days, usually you get that feeling like they're still around. When people see a loved one who's just passed away, it's usually right after they die.
Yeah.
So there's an old belief that when you die, you're given a period. Traditionally, it's said to be 3 days. I've seen complex occult explanations for why it's 3 days. I don't know if it's 3 days. I don't know if it's 2 days. I don't know if it's a week. I think there's some beliefs that it's actually till you're properly buried.
Yeah.
But you're given a period. But whatever it is, you're given a period of time to make peace with the fact that you're dead. Which, in my opinion, explains a lot of the fact that you have people who see the spirit of the loved one up till usually the funeral, and then often enough at the funeral. I've seen a lot of descriptions from psychics who claim to have sat at funerals, and they'll see the deceased sitting there and complaining about what the loved ones are wearing, and fussing over everything. Who came and who didn't, who's not grieving enough.
Yeah.
And then they move on, and that's why you don't see them as much anymore. What do they move on to is, of course, the great question. And I can't tell you what happens for sure, because I'm still alive. I haven't died yet, funny enough.
Yeah.
Last I checked, you haven't died yet either.
Not officially, no.
Although I have talked to people who have officially died, believe it or not.
Yeah. And come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole near-death experience thing. Which is actually something else worth getting into. Because people have a misunderstanding. They think the near-death experience is neatly explained. It's really not. Because people say, the usual explanation that you hear is that the tunnel and with the light at the end of it is the way that oxygen deprivation affects the brain. The problem is it really isn't. Like, if you look at other examples that it isn't consistent with oxygen deprivation. The other issue is, well, there's three issues. One is it's not as consistent with oxygen dep as people think it is. Two is it happens in instances without the oxygen deprivation to begin with. And
Uh,
three, and perhaps most interestingly, we've had instances of people who have died with EEG, the one they hook to the brain,
yeah.
with the
E-
EEG hooked to their brain, showing no brain activity, but they still had near-death experiences.
hmm.
It's like, and the skeptical answer to this is, well, there still had to be brain activity. It's like, okay, but how do you know that? Well, there had to be, like, but how do you know that? You're assuming there has to be, you're assuming there has to be because it fits your worldview. That's not necessarily really good evidence. Um, yeah, at least I know I haven't seen your particular episode on the subject. There's a lot of, as I'm saying, there's a lot of problems with the natural explanations for near-death experience. Um, it doesn't, the phenomenon described doesn't fit the medical side as neatly as skeptics want to say that it does.
Oh, did you see the comment from Lisa?
Which the one about NDEs,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah,
Or
Lisa for Truth
scientifically
saying that
explained.
they have a scientific explanation. She has a show on it, and I'm aware. And Lisa has some. I have
That'd
a
be
lot of
cool.
respect for Lisa for Truth, but I'm not an atheist. We're going to disagree on some things. Um, and
I would be interested in seeing that show.
let's. I think you should check it out. And let's be clear. I'm not necessarily making the case that near-death experiences are proof for the existence of God, because I think the more serious problem isn't the proposed natural explanations for them, which don't, like I said, don't fit as well as I think they do. The problem is the experience that, Christians die, they have an experience of God, of Yahweh and Jesus. Buddhists die, they have an experience of Buddha, and so on and so forth,
Hmm.
which raises some interesting questions. But again, you're positing brain activity where there is no evidence of brain activity. That doesn't work. It's maybe there's another natural explanation we haven't run into, or maybe there's more to the explanations that people have offered. But I don't think the science on it is nearly as well settled as people think it is.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because here's the other thing I find interesting is, yeah, people tend to have near-death experiences in line with their religious beliefs. Um, the one I find interesting is there's also a large there is a I don't know how large. I'm not sure anyone's ever done a serious study of how large, but there is a non-zero percentage of near-death experiences that are quite different than the ones that we all think of.
Yeah.
Because when I say near-death experience, people tend to think of the embraced by the light, the I saw heaven, heaven is for real, where you get the tunnel with light at the end of it. You go up the tunnel, you meet God, you meet your loved ones. Everything's happy, happy, joy, joy, cheerful, cheerful, cheerful.
Yeah, I've heard of some of the other ones
People
where
go to hell
people thought, yeah, they.
and have horrific experiences. Um, which is a little less in keeping, I think, with some of the psychological explanations. Which again isn't to say that it can't be explained.
Well, to me, I would think that there's got to be some correlation between the near-death experiences and what happens when you dream.
That I think there's some logic there. Certainly, our brain produces a whole slew of chemicals, some of which are very psychoactive.
Yeah, but I've heard explanations that they've run uh, tests
Yeah.
like quantum particle, where they can view the brain on sort of a quantum level,
Hmm.
and they noticed that certain particles just disappeared while the person was asleep. They were there when they were conscious.
I haven't heard about
They
this
were
before. I'm gonna
gone.
have to look into it.
Yeah, they were gone when they were sleeping, as if part of you like traveled somewhere, and then when the person woke up, they returned.
And that's particularly interesting when you keep in mind that a lot of ancient cultures believe that when you dream, you go somewhere.
Yeah, you go to an actual different plane of existence.
I need to look this up. I'm curious. And that's a whole other thing is we really don't understand what consciousness is.
No.
Um,
Now, we might all be part of some big universal consciousness.
Yep.
It might be separate.
Um,
We might have reincarnation. Who
you know,
knows?
there's the interesting argument, philosophically speaking, of does consciousness even exist? Or
Mm.
to quote Bill Nye from a discussion I saw with him and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and a few other notable scientists, um, where Neil put it in more eloquent terms, but Bill Nye's more eloquent and simple description was, "Wait, do you mean I only think I'm thinking?"
Yeah, it's
um,
possible.
there's an interesting idea in philosophy as well called the philosophical zombie, which is someone that looks like you or me who responds like you and I, but the light of awareness, the light of consciousness, if you will, isn't there.
Mm.
Um, I will say I think there's an interesting way to test how. I mean, I think there's no denying at this point that consciousness and the brain are intertwined.
Well, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's too much
yeah,
evidence of brain injury affecting
consciousness.
consciousness and whatnot.
Yeah. So I'm certainly not saying that consciousness exists outside of the brain. Uh, um, Born Wrong brings up the brain in the vat argument. There were actually all disembodied brains floating in vats.
Oh, yes.
That's another idea. The philosophical zombie idea is it's more it's a machine. It's like a artificial intelligence.
Ah,
But an artificial intelligence as we currently have our artificial intelligence, where it's a series of stimulus response without the self awareness and the consciousness that humans appear to have. All of this also intertwines, as Born Wrong pointed out, with the larger question of what is the nature of reality? Are we even, are we just brains in vats? Are we actually tied into hooked up into the matrix? Um, to use a very old version of it that I've always been somewhat partial to, there was a Buddhist monk who spoke of having a dream that he was a butterfly, and the dream was so real and so vivid that when he woke up, he questioned whether he was a Buddhist monk who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or whether he was a butterfly dreaming that he was a monk.
yeah.
And
Heard that one.
how on earth can we possibly know? And the answer is we can't. I mean, even some of, and I'm by no means an expert, but even some of what I've understood of quantum physics, reality as we understand reality is not real. Reality as we understand it isn't real.
We see the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There's a lot swirling underneath.
I do obviously believe that there is. I think consciousness is undeniably intertwined with the brain. I don't think that necessarily means that it's dependent on the brain. Well, I'm a Christian and I'm a paranormal investigator. It's kind of inevitable that I believe that there's a soul, that there's some fundamental aspect of what makes a person beyond the merely physical, and the explanation, for consciousness might very well exist in quantum mechanics, and there are some scientists and neurologists that are working in that direction.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that would go a long way. You'd
yeah,
have to know. You'd have to be thinking that to believe in ghosts, to see
yeah,
ghosts.
not necessarily.
Well, because otherwise, what would a ghost be? I mean, just some sort of an echo of
Yes, that would be. That's an interesting
time
question,
echo.
and it does relate to the afterlife. So we're not actually off, as much as it may seem like it. We're not off topic,
No, we're good.
but there's two major explanations of ghosts, um, from the believer's side of the spectrum. Well, in reality there's more. There's three major explanations for ghosts. One I tend to dismiss, and if you want to know why I dismiss it, go see the videos I've done on ghosts, because it's a longer discussion. But it basically that ghosts are in fact demons in disguise.
Ah,
The Bible doesn't actually say that anywhere, nor does it actually logically fit the information available. The second explanation is the one that most people are familiar with, which is that the soul Born Wrong says energy instead of soul is an option.
Hmm.
But hypothetically speaking, couldn't the soul be energy?
Well, everything breaks down to
Yeah,
energy eventually
this is true. Well, everything essentially is energy, just at different
in different
vibrations and things like that.
wavelengths and forms.
But I don't, I don't necessarily think the soul is something that it's something we can't currently measure. I don't think it's something we can't measure. If it exists, I think there eventually will be a way to measure it. And I can actually, in point of fact, I can offer what I think would be an adequate way of testing for the existence of a soul using technology that doesn't currently exist, but is well within the realm of theoretical possibility.
Hmm.
And it comes from a TV show I know you're rather partial of, actually.
Oh,
Beam Me Up.
oh, the transporter.
Transport. Because here's the thing transporter technology. If we had the ability to actually transport somebody, and let's be clear on what a transporter actually does. It means essentially destroying your physical form, just killing you, annihilating your physical form, and reconstituting you on a quantum
Different,
level somewhere else.
different place, different time. Yeah.
If the person that went into the transporter and the person who came out of the transporter really were the same person in every testable way, I think that merely destroys the idea of a soul.
Hmm.
Because that, and I may be wrong. There are undoubtedly there are philosophers that would disagree with me, but in my personal opinion, if you could simply recreate using this hypothetical technology, and it's not that hypothetical, we do have the ability to do it on an atomic level, as I understand it.
Hmm.
We've managed to beam particles and things like that around.
Yes.
Nothing on the we're not even at the level of being able to do it with bacteria, so far as I know.
Yeah, we're not.
So we're a long way from people, but it is at least a technology that we're working on, and I think it would at the very least, throw into serious doubt the existence of a soul.
Hmm. Unless the soul was somehow
Transferred with the
bound
yeah.
into the person
Which we don't,
on
but
such a level.
that would imply that it does, that the soul is simply emergent. In my opinion, that would imply that the soul is an emergent property of physicality, which means when you die and your body eventually decomposes, it's gone.
Hmm.
But until that technology, it's not a question that's going to be resolved anytime soon. But at least it's a question that could be resolved, in my personal opinion. Um, but then again, we're a long way. We're a long way from that technology, and we still have more questions than answers when it comes to consciousness. Which is and here's another thing when I make these points. My point about near-death experiences isn't closing a door. It's actually quite the opposite. Is I want to see more research done on the subject.
Yeah.
I don't want people to conclude it has to be natural. Don't want people to conclude it has to be God. I want people to investigate it further. I want people to investigate the nature of consciousness further. I want it. I'm the sort of Christian who thinks that science is the method of figuring out how God did the magic trick.
Hmm.
So it's like, keep doing it. But so then again, I guess that's an obvious thing we've danced around. Maybe I should get into it. What do I think hell is?
Yeah. If there's been so many movies and so many books and whatnot written on the subject.
I believe hell is more of a state of mind than a state of a place.
Okay.
Which isn't to say that it's not real, because I've had people misunderstand me when I've said this before. And Lisa, for truth comments, she links her sources. And Lisa, I know you. I don't question that, which is why, again, I encourage people to see your own video on the subject. This is discussion, not me saying you're wrong. I'm saying I disagree. There's a difference. um, You're wrong. To me, at least, if I say you're wrong, it means I can prove it. I disagree as an opinion.
Yeah.
But so what is hell? there's a traditional Christian answer, which is it's separation from God.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Um, which is kind of what I mean when I say that it's more a state of mind than a place. There's a quote from an medieval play by Christopher Marlowe, who was a contemporary of William Shakespeare,
Hmm.
um, in which Faust, the legendary man who sold the soul to the devil, asks Mephistopheles, the devil he sells his soul to, how can you be here when you should be in hell? And it's like, hell is where we are, and wherever we go, hell comes with us.
Hmm.
Um, I think more, I think actually the best depiction I've seen of hell in fiction is a book that was written by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce. It has a really, I highly recommend this book for an interesting take on the afterlife in general, not just hell, not just heaven. Um, but it's an interesting thought experiment. The narrator of the story starts out in a city covered in gloom, like a city that's in twilight. A little bit, the sun hasn't gone down yet, or isn't quite done going down yet, and the city is enormous and just keeps getting bigger. I mean, like light years distance to some of the furthest houses. And there are people from throughout history that live in this city. Each they have their own houses. They tend to keep to themselves. There's no rule that they have to keep to themselves. It's just that by their own nature, they tend to keep to themselves.
Hmm.
And they tend to, as time goes on, the houses get further and further away from each other. The people that have been there the longest would take centuries in our understanding of time to walk to. Case in, to one of the closest that people could still visit, two people talked to the narrator about having gone to visit Napoleon.
Hmm.
And that they had to travel light years to do it. Very good question. Lisa wants to know, where does the pitchfork and pointy-tailed devil come from?
The Romans.
Well, medieval art more accurately.
Yeah, no, I was joking.
By and large, it was influenced by a pair of pagan deities. One would be the Greek god Pan, who is your classic goat legs, hooves, cloven hooves, horns, satyr. And then the other is Cernunnos, who is a Celtic deity who looks very much the same way. It's very much a depiction that appears in medieval and Renaissance art. It's not one you find it's not mentioned anywhere in the Bible.
Right.
It's something out of folklore. Even looking at descriptions from exorcists and demonologists who've seen demons take visible form. Believe it or not, there are a couple of instances where demons have supposedly appeared like that.
Wow.
There's a very famous case that took place in the United States that's been speculated to have involved Satan himself, where he showed up as the classic Pan figure, complete with a horn, a throne of fire. But even the priests involved were like, it's not how he really looks. It was an attempt to throw the credibility of the priest into question, because if an exorcist goes back to the Vatican, so yeah, I cast a demon out, and when it appeared, it looked like this. The Pope's gonna want their head examined. It sounds ridiculous.
Could it be Satan?
If you look at medieval, the Bible describes Satan as a dragon, and as well also as a roaring lion and as an angel of light. At different times, and if you look at a lot of medieval art, older medieval artwork that actually is supposed to depict what demons look like, they're very common. You find them in churches a lot. You know what they look what form of statuary is supposed to look like a demon?
Gargoyles?
Mm-hmm. The idea of a gargoyle is you designed it to look like a demon to scare away other evil spirits.
Yeah.
People I've talked to, and no, I have not seen a demon take this particular. I've seen demonic spirits before. I've never seen one take this particular, similar but not quite this particular shape. But I have talked to people who've seen them, and they look a lot like gargoyles. Just quite a bit uglier. Yes, and Borderlong said, "Don't forget the bat wings." Um,
Gotta have the
the
bat
thing,
wings.
in my personal opinion, I don't think demons or devils or angels, for that matter, have a true form, as it were. They're spirit beings. They're beings of energy and of thought. They look like whatever the hell they want to look like.
Or what the person interprets them to look like.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the interesting thing, because if you can find descriptions in South America of God, or you can find sculptures of things that they call gods or they call demons, and they go to Africa and find very similar sculptures, and where one culture might call it angel, call it a god, one might call it a demon, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there could arguably be a certain consistency of appearance, but I think it's more a question of what they want to look like than, oh, this is what they have to look like.
Yeah.
Um, Certainly, I think though it is a good point too. Just because it looks like an angel doesn't make it an angel. Also, for that matter, angels don't look anything like people think they're supposed to look, which is a whole
Yeah.
other topic.
Yeah.
But so what Lewis proposes for hell is essentially this: people are left alone with their own faults, their own selfishness, their own negativity, and while it's implied there's a time where this will change, what torture you're actually suffering is simply your own. Is your own of your own devising. In case in point, in Napoleon's case, he had gotten so wrapped up in himself that when they went out to visit him, they found this huge elaborate mansion, and he just was pacing back and forth, muttering to himself in French, to the point that he had actually ground trench in the floor. And this is another part of the whole idea, which is that eventually, during all these discussions, a bus rolls up. And all of these damn souls get on the bus. And the driver is described as being somewhat vaguely implied to be Jesus.
Uh,
But the bus then takes them somewhere else.
Jesus, the bus driver.
And the place that it takes them is a beautiful natural setting. Waterfalls and forests and rivers. And the problem they have, and Lewis actually didn't come up with this idea of his own on his own. He came up with it based on a science fiction author's description of traveling to the past. But the people in hell were like ghosts here. Everything was far more real than they were. Even walking on the blades of grass was painful. As an aside, he actually addresses in the story as well that basically people that are in hell long enough get so wrapped up into themselves that they simply become an echo of a single emotion. And that some of these beings find their way back, and then this is essentially where ghosts come from. Oh, which reminds me, I need to get back to that other explanation of ghosts, but I will. Let me complete the thought.
Kind of reminds me of that the movie What Dreams May Come.
Yeah, I think intentionally.
Yeah, I
But
think there was a lot of that.
while they're in heaven, while they're in this place, each is met by a guide of some sort. With the exception of our narrator, every guide they meet is someone they knew and respected and loved in life. And the narrator meets a famous writer. But they're all, and then the guide that they meet tries to get them to work past their own bullshit and get out of their own heads. What I particularly like about the concept is it's not you didn't believe in God, so you went to hell.
Yeah, which I've always
Which I reject.
I've always hated that. I've always hated that
because
line
okay,
of thought.
if you don't believe in the Christian God, you're going to hell. Which Christian God? There are thousands of denominations. You can't believe in all of them.
Well, there's that. There's all the people that were born before
before
the Bible. was even written. There's all the people that
We
are
were born that never have any
just
contact with
yeah, that
it.
just happen to be born in the wrong country. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you know,
You're going to hell because you got born
yeah.
in Mexico.
There's no fairness there.
Um, I agree. But in this case, like one of the stories I thought was more poignant is this woman who sees her brother. It's like, where's my son? You can't keep my son from me. And you find out that in life, this woman was obsessed with her son
Mm.
on an unhealthy level to the point that neglected her husband, neglected her other children.
Mm.
All she cared about in life was her perfect, darling, angelic boy. And it wasn't even no, you can't see your son. It's like you gotta get out of your own head. You gotta care about other people.
Yeah.
Other people loved you and you rejected them because they weren't him. And the other people, there's the other example of somebody who um, didn't think that where they were was hell, didn't think this was heaven. Just thought because everything was more real here. What if I could take a single apple and bring it back with me? How valuable would that be to everybody? Because it'd be more real, the food would be more valuable, it'd be more taste better, and a bit of the natural world around them says, please put that back. And this also leads to one of my favorite aspects of the story, because when they're talking about all of this, it's like, well, why can't he just bring it with him? It'd never fit. I'm like, what do you mean? And the guide for the narrator plucks a single blade of grass and points with the very tip of the blade of grass at a tiny crack in the ground. And hell, in all of its size and all of its distance, was crammed in this tiny, insignificant, barely visible speck of a crack. Because, very much, at least as I understand it, on the idea that a lot of wickedness is very petty.
Yeah. It's a nice metaphor.
Yeah. It also makes me think of our friend and frequent guest, John French, who on the show one time made a comment that serial killers tend to be kind of pathetic.
Yeah.
When you get down to it.
Yeah, there's nothing like glamorous about them.
Yeah. They're sorry for attention. Yeah. But the thing I particularly most like about the story, though, is that even in hell, there's a chance of redemption.
Mm.
The guide to the narrator ultimately puts it, that there are people who will choose to remain in that city, who when it ends will look around and realize they've been in hell, always been in hell, even when they on Earth they were in hell. But the people that surpass that base nature, that surpass their issues, will see even the worst of their suffering on Earth as part of heaven. But that idea that our choices define us and define our destiny, and that we're not damned or redeemed based on did I believe in the right God or not.
Yeah.
I think hell may very well be eternal, or at least the next best thing to eternal for Lucifer and his demons. But for humans, I don't think so. I think
I tend to think reincarnation has some good points to it, because it just makes sense in sort of even as a recycling of energy.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily I don't like the idea of reincarnation, to be completely honest, for personal, non-philosophical reasons. I just loathe the idea of being stuck coming back to this planet. But I don't necessarily discount it. One of the very first guests I had on, before Drew even joined me, let alone before yourself, Robert Snow wrote an excellent book about reincarnation. Lisa, actually, I would suggest that you check out Robert L. Snow's story, Confessions of a Past Life Skeptic, because it's an account that raises some really interesting questions about the nature of consciousness and survival after death.
Hmm.
What's so fascinating about Snow's story in particular, I think, is he vividly remembered a past life as someone just well known enough that research could be done to verify his existence,
Right.
but not somebody that
Not
anyone's
somebody,
ever heard of. It's
not
like it
somebody
was an
famous.
obscure artist who was mostly famous for having been roommates with a much more famous artist while they were at art school in Paris. That's most of how anyone, even most art historians have no idea who the guy was.
Nice.
But he kept detailed recordings of his sessions, and was able to match the two up. And I mean, to match the 23 points of information they mentioned in the session, the guy's history, he had to request the guy's personal diaries on microfilm. I mean, it took an enormous amount of work. There was no documentaries, there was no books, there was nothing he could find, and this was decades ago when the internet wasn't a thing yet.
Right. So not
So he couldn't
somebody
do
that
the
you could
research in
just,
5 minutes the way we might have been able to do it today.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's proof of reincarnation. I'm just saying
No, but
it's
it's a
an
nice,
interesting,
it's a good story.
it's an interesting, compelling case, particularly in the fact that he had no good reason to make up that story.
Right.
He didn't believe in reincarnation going into it, and it ruined his career. He was the homicide captain for, I want to say, Indianapolis, which in policing is a very prestigious job.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandfather was a police captain.
Yeah. Well, being a police captain in general is very prestigious. Of the various divisions to be in charge of, being the head of homicide
yeah.
is particularly prestigious. And he, came forward. He wrote the book. When the book got published, he was almost immediately demoted.
Yeah.
He went from being head of homicide to public relations officer. And he knew it was gonna. I mean, he knew it was gonna happen because police. And it's fascinating because in my experience, police often have experiences with the paranormal. Just because when weird shit happens, you call the cops.
Yeah.
But police tend to be very skeptical and very conservative.
Yeah.
So coming out and saying you had a past life experience, not the best thing for your career as a cop. Born Wrong has an excellent point, which is why, also a large part of why I like Snow's story, which is that Born Wrong always finds it funny how many claims of people being like Cleopatra and other kings and queens come from past life regression.
Oh yeah.
Everyone remembers being somebody important. That's another reason I find his stories compelling. Is it's like it wasn't an important guy.
Well, it also makes it sort of ridiculous when you think like Cleopatra. Okay, Cleopatra was like 3,000 years ago.
Well, also like everybody was supposed to.
2,000.
I like to make the joke that the only past life I know for sure I had is I was Cleopatra because everybody was Cleopatra in a past life. But everybody was somebody famous. It's a good point Penn and Teller on their show Bullshit made about the subject. It's like they made the joke that Teller specifically, he does remember his past lives. In all of his past lives, he was a dog washer. He watched a lot of dogs named King and Prince, but he never watched a famous dog. His job was always just a dog. He watched dogs. It's like, that's a reincarnation story you can almost believe. Because it doesn't make you more important.
Penn and Teller are awesome. I love those two.
I actually have a friend who's a hypnotist who does past life regression. The argument she makes specifically about past life regression, I think, is pretty good. Is if your brain go under hypnosis, your brain shows you the series of images. Why did your brain show you that series of images? Maybe it's a past life. Maybe it's basically just an elaborate dream sequence. But in her opinion, it suggests that your subconscious mind is sending you a series of images. It's interesting to ask why that set of images, why that set of circumstances.
Right. But anyway, we should probably get back to you were going to talk about.
Ghosts.
Yeah.
So the other explanation of ghosts. So most people, when they think of ghosts, think of souls of the dead. There's a third explanation that's popular with parapsychologists, and I actually partly believe this as well as believing that it's souls of the dead. It's called the stone tape theory, or granite tape theory, and it holds that stone, or at least certain types of stone, can hold emotional energy. That when an emotionally charged event happens, it releases energy. The energy can get recorded, if you will, held, stored in some way in natural features, and then when certain conditions happen, can replay themselves.
Huh.
Um, so
That wouldn't explain a lot of ghost sightings, though.
actually, it would. Not all of them.
Really, because a lot of houses, it's not like there's always big stones around.
That true, but snow may not be the only thing that will hold it, and even
Okay.
you don't know what's under it for that matter. But here's the thing that makes this idea. This essentially what it's implying is that ghosts aren't an intelligence or a consciousness. They're actually just essentially a recording of an event.
Right.
And if you look at a lot of descriptions of hauntings, this matches up pretty well.
Yeah.
There are lots of people that will describe the experience of they'll hear at every night at a specific time, they hear footsteps in the hallway. That's it. No attempts at communication, no red rum written on the mirrors, no EVPs, just footsteps.
Right.
Always at the same time, like clockwork.
So that would explain that one type of ghost.
Yeah. And again, a lot of ghosts actually do fit into this category.
Right.
Where it's a simple repetition of... I even seen, funny enough, a Christian who was generally very anti-occult suggests that, yes, there are ghosts that aren't demons. This is what they are. And sometimes this is happening, and that's not demonic. That's just a natural feature type of thing. In my personal opinion, I think this explains some ghost phenomenon, but there's also incidences where people can have had conversations with spirit, the spirit.
Right.
Through electronic voice phenomenon, sometimes simply by talking the way you and I are now, where spirits react to external stimuli, and other things of that nature that suggest an intelligence at work.
Like Chris Caesar's account.
We should poke him and see if we can get him on again, just by virtue of the fact he's a really good guest.
Yeah. See what's new with him.
Yes. Lisa points out I'd like to go to the Gettysburg battlefield. Born Wrong says, isn't it supposed to be the stone with a high quality of quartz? And also wood is often thought to be as good as well. And then, yes, Lisa's also pointing out she wants to pay her respects at Gettysburg and Ghost's bonus. And I'm not an expert on stone tape, Born Wrong, but if memory serves you right, it's typically supposed to be quartz, and quartz having certain properties ties into
quartz
theory.
I've heard about.
And granite has quartz in it.
Energy work and stuff, yeah.
So it does logically tie together. Wood as well would make sense given houses. I know one of the common examples that's given for this, there's incidents in England where people regularly saw, I don't know if they still do, but they regularly used to see a Roman legion march in a very particular pattern over and over and over again. They always noticed it was from the knees up. They never saw the bottom of the legs.
Right.
And when they did some research, it turned out the road originally was higher. The road was originally lower.
Yeah.
There we go. There was an older Roman road underneath the modern road, and you can't see the legs anymore because of this. But again, it was one that followed a very specific pattern. You see this on a lot of battlefields, too. Case in point, they will not let you in there after dark for reasons of respect, but I've talked to people who've lived in San Antonio. Some nights you walk past the Alamo at night, you can hear gunfire going off inside. It's common enough. I knew a woman who, when she was young, she was at church camp in San Antonio, they deliberately detoured across to the other side of the street and came back when they passed the Alamo because of the gunshots.
Huh.
It's that common. Um, I think there isn't obviously there isn't empirical evidence of the existence of ghosts. There's enough. It's often been a point of the show that I think there's more than enough anecdotal. As much as I hate to put it, there's anecdotal evidence that there's things going on that should be investigated more thoroughly. That doesn't always mean this. And again, I'm not saying it's proof of the existence of ghosts, but it is proof of that something's going on. People should question, not simply assume they know the answer to.
Right.
Because here's a very common explanation for ghosts that doesn't work, and this has become relatively recently, which is infrasound.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, we've talked about that on other shows.
yeah, but I think it's probably worth mentioning because we have had new listeners, old listeners, things like that. Well, the common explanations for ghostly phenomenon in haunted houses is what's called infrasound. Infrasound is sound below a register of being able to hear. Like if you have a leak on a pipe, and that ping, ping, but very slow, so it's buried enough you can't quite hear it, but the vibrations get to you. Your body can register that, and it can in fact cause feelings of paranoia. It can cause hallucinations and other phenomenon associated with haunted houses. Mythbusters actually did an episode of this,
Yeah.
and they
saw
couldn't
that.
reproduce the effects,
Yeah, I saw that.
which I think is worthy of note in itself. But here's the other thing: if infrasound is severe enough to be causing paranoia, it's because your organs are liquefying. The reason you get the paranoia and the hallucinations is it's a body's defensive mechanism to tell you to get the hell out. Liquefying organs is not a common symptom of haunted houses.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Let's see. And that's I suppose another interesting question though is what about all the other afterlives? Particularly since I opened the door to near-death experiences, I should address the fact that people have near-death experiences of realms other than heaven and hell.
Right.
I said before that I think hell is more of a state of mind than a place. I think the same is true of heaven. I mean, as I've said in previous shows, I tend to be henotheistic more than monotheistic. The belief that there are a number of gods, but Yahweh is the top of the heap, as it were. You're not wrong to worship a god other than my God. Your God is ultimately subordinate to mine. Your God is working for my God, or arguably maybe my God is also subordinate to a greater God. It's my belief system, so I am admittedly biased in thinking that mine's on top.
Yeah.
But the point being, it doesn't. In my version of religious cosmology, you're not worshiping Satan if you don't worship my God. You're just worshiping a different God.
Yeah.
But I'm somewhat inclined to think if a Hellenistic pagan dies, their heaven may look a lot more like the Elysian Fields.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see it in the way that you expect this. There's a saying, for that matter, about God that if you ask a horse to draw a picture of God, they draw a horse. People's beliefs, spirits don't have fixed forms. They appear like they want to appear, and they appear, as you said it before, how we expect them to appear.
Yeah. Probably taking images from our minds.
Yeah, I think if heaven and hell are more mental than physical, they probably also take forms born out of our own minds. There's the neat idea in an episode of the TV show Supernatural, which is an enormous range of philosophical and theological problems, but it's a fun show, where they go to heaven, basically, it's the best moments of their life on replay.
Which even that you would think would get old.
Yeah, which is why It's an interesting idea. I don't. It's like how many times can you relive that first kiss before it gets tiresome?
Exactly.
Which is why I don't think that I don't really think I could properly describe what I think heaven or hell is because I don't think there are things that we can relate to. You run into a lot of people. There are a number of people who claim to have been to hell, and a few that claim to have been to heaven. The most famous person to claim to go to both heaven and hell is Emanuel Swedenborg, who was an 18th century religious and philosophical figure who claimed to visit heaven and hell and claimed there were multiple levels to heaven and hell.
Hmm.
Um, his ideas were
just
very
like Dante.
not quite that elaborate, but yes.
Yeah.
And even the Bible talks about there's degrees to punishment to your punishment, and you will be each will be rewarded according to their works, which certainly implies that a serial killer and a guy who killed like somebody who killed 20 people and a guy who killed 5 people are not going to be punished the same way in hell. Um, but if memory serves, and I've only read up about what he did. I didn't study it that directly, but from what I understand, there's like 3 heavens and 3 hells, and you pass through, basically the degree of sin. And you see this, for that matter, in Eastern religion, in Buddhism in particular.
Yeah.
There are multiple hells. China is, of course, famous for having thousands of hells.
Yeah.
But in Buddhism, particularly, I want to say there's a freezing hell, there's a fiery hell, and there's at least one other one. And basically, what sin you committed to send you to hell determines which one you go to. And
ice hell.
Yeah.
Upside down hell.
Clown hell.
Fire hell. No, it was from Buffy the Vampire Slayer there. Spike was like trying to elaborate on the different kinds of hell, and that was pretty much what he could come up with was, freezing hell, fire hell, and upside down hell. That was it.
Freezing upside down fire hell all together at once.
Freezing upside down fire.
But I think, and what I also liked about the Buddhist concept of hell is the sin you commit determines which hell you go to, which hell you go to determines how long you're there. But none of them are eternal. You eventually get out. Even the hell of the flame hell, which is the worst of the 3, you spend thousands of years in it. But to do it, you have to murder one of your parents, murder a Bata Vista, which would be somebody
like a holy man.
More than a holy man. You're right, a holy man. In Buddhism, in some forms of Buddhism, at least, there's these figures they call Bodhisattvas, which are people who reached enlightenment. They're often called Buddhas, although they're not.
Okay.
One of whom you've seen, and everyone else listening to has seen, and probably thinks is Buddha, which is the chubby guy.
Yeah.
The smiling Buddha. He's actually Bodhi, who's also called the smiling or the laughing Buddha, and he is not Buddha himself. He is not Siddhartha. Buddha. The original Buddha was Siddhartha Gautama. He was Indian man who was born in India to the ruling class. And this is a long topic we could go into all on its own. And Lisa said, and I'm not disagreeing with her, you should read Dante's Inferno. I've read Dante's Inferno.
Oh, yeah.
I've read Dante's Inferno. I've seen at least 2 different animated versions of it. I am familiar with Dante's Inferno. Which also has this idea that you can eventually leave hell.
Yeah. Work release.
I would also suggest there's an excellent science fiction version, or sci-fi fantasy version, by, Larry Niven, called Inferno. And a sequel to it called Escape from Hell, which is a modern update to Dante, not to disrespect Dante in any way, just because, some of the sins that were popular in Dante's time aren't so common anymore. And some things that are popular now didn't really exist in Dante's time.
Right. And Dante's work was very political.
Oh, good Lord, yes.
And somewhat satirical. Some people have
Which makes it all the
claimed.
funnier that people have very much turned it into a model for their version of hell.
Yeah.
And good lord, we need to get wrapping this up, I think, because it's 7:15.
Yep.
And we've got company coming over in about 15 minutes. But, I think we're actually pretty good. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I mean, we pretty well covered heaven and hell. I mean, that's as
Yep.
far as I'm concerned.
I think so too. Folks, that's going to do it for tonight. We should be back next Sunday about 5 o'clock again, Eastern Standard Time.
Hopefully, yeah.
If you can't make it, I'll still broadcast, but hopefully you'll make it. So make sure to tune in. If you enjoyed what we're doing, if you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. You can also donate to our Patreon, patreon.com/demonology. And of course, share it with your friends. All those do a lot to help out the show. If you hate what we're doing, please feel free to put a comment about that in the description below. If you think I'm an idiot, feel free to tell me so.
Yep.
It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you all. I want to thank Born Wrong, Lisa for Truth, and Virgo Triad, all for being good enough to join us in the chat. It's always a pleasure to have people in the chat. For those of you listening later, keep in mind whenever we broadcast live, we do have the chat going, and I always make an effort to read and respond to questions from the chat. That's it for tonight. This is Kevin Mears saying good night and God bless.
Brian McKinley saying keep your fangs sharp.
Good night, everybody.